How to take pictures of diving. Revise 2023 July. What we will cover: gear and exposure, planning, where to shoot from, problems and issues, and vertical tracking. Gear and exposure. For day and outdoor camera, most any camera you have with a fast continuous rate, 5 or 6 frames per second or faster. Lens. For APS-C, 18 to 140, full frame 24 to 120, long shots 75 to 300. Exposure, mode S or TV, shutter priority 1/2000th of a second, ISO auto. We're shooting at 1/2000th of a second for the fast rotating dives. There you need the fast shutter speed. Take a test shot, then adjust the exposure compensation as needed. Night and indoors. Camera. We need a camera with a high max ISO of 25,600 or more. Lens. You need to use the fast 2.8 lenses, 24 to 70-2.8 and 70 to 200-2.8. Exposure. Mode M, manual, 1/1000th of a second, aperture 2.8, wide open, ISO auto. Take a test shot, then adjust exposure compensation as needed. Exposure mode M, 1/1000th of a second, f2.8, wide open. Set the ISO manually as needed for the lighting. I used ISO 4000 at my last indoor meet. At 1/1000th of a second, you will get motion blur on the fast rotating dives. Planning. Will you have access to the pool deck? Walk the pool before the meet. Where will the judges be sitting? Look for good angles. Look for obstructions to avoid. Then determine how to avoid them. Determine the direction of the sun. What parts of the pool to avoid shooting from. Pool layout and shooting positions. This is an aerial view of the pool where we had our last outdoor meet. At the bottom is a yellow arrow. That is the direction that the sun is coming from. The red square just above that is the location of the judges. The 4 orange diamonds are my shooting locations. And the orange lines are the shot lines to the diving board. Position diamond on the bottom, shooting right next to the judges towards the board. Diamond on the right, shooting the length of the pool to the front of the board as they're coming off the board. Diamond on the top, shooting from opposite the judges. Turns out that was a bad location. Too much sunlight coming into the lens from there. It scouted it out, but scrapped it because it didn't work. Diamond on the left, that is slightly behind and to the side of the diving board, so you'll get a back shot with the diver coming off the board in front of you. You'll see pictures later. Where to shoot from? You walk around the pool. Near the judges, that's the bottom left-hand picture. In front of the diver, shooting the length of the pool, that's the middle picture. And from behind the diver, that's the right-hand picture. Problems and issues. First, if your school does not have a dive pool. Next, access. Third is the sun. Fourth, visual obstructions. Fifth, watch the background. Next, what is a technically good dive? And finally, when is the final deadline for your yearbook? If your school does not have a diving pool, shooting diving practice becomes difficult because you have to drive to where they practice. And because you have to do that, your ability to practice and learn to shoot diving will be reduced. Dive meets will be all away meets. Access or lack of access. Problem: you may not have access to walk around the pool deck. You should find out any access issues in advance. Solution: You have to shoot from the public viewing locations. You may not have ideal photo angles to the diving board, so you have to walk the pool before the meet and look for different locations to shoot from. If you arrive late, you're going to be scrambling for a shooting location, so give yourself time to find a good location that you can shoot from. You will likely have to use a long lens because you're not going to be close on the pool deck. The sun. Try to avoid shooting towards the sun. This is to avoid the reflection and glare of the sun off the water, and also to avoid the glare of the sun in your lens. The sun shooting arc. The orange arrow in the diagram is the direction of the sun, going from right to left. I will shoot in the green arc to the right of that vertical blue line, so the 180-degree arc. I will sometimes shoot in the 45-degree wedges to the left of the blue line. I do not shoot in the 90-degree pie on the left because that ends up shooting too much into the sun. Visual obstructions. Watch out for the pool flags. They may get in the way of your picture, and they aren't always taken down. Picture left, shooting down the length of the pool. Pool flags in the way, or for dive directly. I had to move to the left of those flags to get a clear shot of her. Picture right. Diver jumped high. I had to try and put him in between the pool flags. Difficult because it was not always reliable that I could get the diver in between the flags. Still, flags in the way and they distract the view. Watch the background and foreground. If there is something distracting in the background or foreground, move to the right or left or up or down to eliminate or minimize the distraction. As we saw on the previous slide, picture left, the guy's diving. I had to put him in between the flags. Instead, for the next picture right, I went to the right, so I'm shooting from the side of the pool, completely avoiding the flags. What is a technically good dive? Most people do not know what a technically good dive looks like. I sure don't. So it is a good idea to have the dive coach help you with picture selection. That way, the pictures in the yearbook and on the athletic website for the school are good dive pictures. Yearbook. When is the final deadline for your yearbook? Problem. At my school, dive is a late spring sport. The first dive meet is usually after the yearbook's final deadline. Solution. Stage shots. We take pictures of the divers at dive practice. Vertical tracking. Diving, in most sports, the subject moves horizontally, left to right or right to left. But in diving, the subject moves vertically, as shown in the picture on the top right. This requires your muscles to track a vertically moving subject. So your muscles have to be trained for this different tracking direction. Instead of going left-right, now you're going up-down. It may be tempting to use large area zone focusing and not have to manually track the diver. But, first item, you need to make sure that your AF zone is large enough to cover the entire dive. If the AF zone is too small, the diver may leave the AF zone at the top and bottom of the dives. As in this picture, at the top of the diver has left the autofocus zone that's in the green square. And at the bottom of the dive, as she's entering the water, she's going to be out of the autofocus zone. So while she is at the top and bottom, the camera is probably going to focus on that lady in the red in the background, not on the diver. Next, most zone autofocus use something called closest subject logic. What that means is within the autofocus zone, the camera will focus on the closest subject. So if there are two boards and your diver is on the far board, the autofocus may focus on the near board rather than your diver on the far board. If you are behind the board, the camera will focus on the board, as shown here. Picture left. If that diver was in the middle board or the far board, the camera will be focusing on that close board instead of the diver. Picture right. You're shooting from behind the board. Well, instead of focusing on the diver, the camera will be focusing on the board itself. Tracking. Some cameras have an autofocus tracking feature that you can use to track the diver for you. But you need to learn how it works and test it before the meet. You need to find out what could distract and break the tracking. For example, if the tracking uses color and if there is someone in the background in a similar color clothing, will the tracking latch on to that other person and lose the diver? Or will the tracking break if the face is not visible? Certain diving, as they're changing their position, their face disappears. And if the camera can't see the face, will it still track the diver? You have to test it to find out. Shooting from the side, alternatives. From the side, the diver is going up and down in the same plane. The distance to the diver is the same. We have two alternatives, manual focus and something called back button focus. Manual focus, what is it? You manually focus on the diver once. Problem, you have to refocus if you move to a different location or if you shoot a diver on a different board. If you do not refocus, your pictures will be out of focus. Back button focus. Back button focus means you press the focus button on the back of the camera and the camera focuses and stays at that focus until you press the focus button again. Problem, like manual, you have to refocus if you move to a different location or if you shoot a diver on a different board. If you do not refocus, your pictures will be out of focus. Hold and tracking stance for diving. I hold the camera using the thumb forward hold as shown in the picture. This hold kind of depends on the lens you're using, but for me this method works. Now I track the vertical dive by bending at the waist. That seems to work for me rather than trying to track dive with my arms. Practice, practice, practice. Tracking a moving subject is a skill that has to be learned. You are training your muscles to move and track, maybe in ways that your muscles are not used to moving. Like I said, you're tracking up and down. You're not tracking left and right. And if you've never done an up and down tracking, your muscles are going to go, hey, what's going on? I can't deal with this. So as you're practicing, you are building muscle memory and training your muscles to deal with the vertical tracking. Next, tracking is a perishable skill. It has to be maintained or you will lose it. Typically, when I shoot a game, the first game of the season is usually difficult as I'm trying to relearn motor skills that I have not used in months. This is why I consider my first game of a season to be a practice and relearning game. Or go to practice. Then you can brush up on your tracking skills as you're practicing with the divers during their practice sessions. Related subjects and other video lessons in the channel. Burst and continuous shooting, tracking a moving subject, and senior presentation. The end. Thank you and good luck, and please like and subscribe.